In the dying days of December, a group of a dozen or so prominent Israelis, academics, former diplomats, politicians, and others, sent a letter to Israel's Attorney General. In 11 pages, they documented, quote, extensive and blatant incitement to genocide in Gaza coming from Israel's political and media class, and they demanded that their country's judiciary do something to stop it. The letter listed example after example of horrifying statements by members of the current government and media figures in Israel, like, quote, the Gaza Strip should be flattened, and for all of them there is but one sentence, and that is death. Or, quote, we should have killed many times 20,000 people. We should have begun with a blow of 100,000. The letter says, quote, these explicit calls to commit atrocious crimes against millions of civilians have turned into a legitimate and regular part of Israeli discourse. Today, calls of these types are an everyday matter in Israel, end quote. This letter was sent well before South Africa filed its case with the International Court of Justice. And there's a lot of overlap in the incitement to genocide section. In other words, South Africa is echoing arguments and concerns of prominent Israelis in filing this case. This should not be a surprise. We are living through one of those moments in the long human story when people are forced to choose which side they're on. And more people, more and more Canadians are standing up to say, enough, this horror show must be stopped. So far, Israel has answered massive global calls for ceasefire by doubling down on the indiscriminate killing, maiming, and deliberate starving of civilians. And so the international community, including Canada, as many of our speakers today have said, has an absolute moral and legal obligation to step in to stop this insensate convulsion of violence and destruction. Today's event is about the machinations of international law, but it's also about the intensely human capacity for empathy and solidarity in the cause of justice. And so after 3 months of watching live-streamed shrapnel and blood-soaked rubble, I'm standing up as one of the signatories of this clear and well-argued statement calling on Canada, our government, to support South Africa's brief at the ICJ. As it's been said, in just over 48 hours, more than 1,000 people, 150 organizations have chosen to get on the right side of history to throw ourselves on one of the only levers available to make the killing stop. I'm proud to see that. I'm also proud to be part of a growing wave of Jewish people around the world who are standing up in this moment and saying, not in our name. Jewish groups, especially newer ones with younger members, are rising to embrace our moral imperative. We say at Passover, no one is free until everyone is free. And we say always, never again means never again for anyone. That's the growing cry you've been hearing across the continent and around the world, from If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace in the US, from Jews Say No to Genocide, the Jewish Faculty Network, Independent Jewish Voices here in Canada. Now, of course, there's not one opinion in the Jewish community. Some groups would have you believe that they represent all Jews in Canada, the Jewish community writ large. What a fatuous flattening of the diversity of Jewish perspectives. We don't all agree. In fact, we're having hard conversations, grindingly hard. One of the most beloved legal figures in Canada, Rosie Abella, former justice on the Supreme Court, wrote in a widely circulated op-ed the other day that, quote, it is a legal absurdity to suggest that a country that is defending itself from genocide is thereby guilty of genocide. That sentiment resonates with many Jews in Canada, but not with all. Look, Hamas launched a vicious and horrific attack on Israeli civilians on October 7th. In this brief we're here to discuss today, South Africa unequivocally condemns those attacks and demands they be investigated as war crimes. But Hamas has not killed more than 100 Israeli children every single day for the more than 3 months since. Hamas has not leveled entire neighborhoods where tens of thousands of people used to live, flattening them to dust. Hamas has not killed journalists, doctors, and nurses, attacked hospitals, archives, historic sites, and government buildings. Hamas has not destroyed 33% of all the buildings in Israel. Hamas is not choking the supply of food and water into Israel to induce mass starvation of Israelis. Those are all things that Israel is doing to Palestinians in Gaza. So to Justice Abella, Rosie, I say with all the respect and love that I have for you, you feel it's a legal absurdity to suggest that Israel is committing genocide? Many Canadians are with me when I say it is a moral absurdity to call it anything else. Engage with the evidence in South Africa's case at the ICJ. In 84 pages and 574 footnotes, you will find the case absolutely overwhelming, incredibly meticulously documented. Let me end with this. Canada's decade-long record of providing international cover for Israel's occupation and violations of international law cannot stand one day longer. The immorality of our government's position has been well understood by people, by Jews, by Israelis for decades and decades. In September of 1967, 14 Israelis wrote an open letter published as an ad in the Haaretz newspaper. It was 100 days after the Six-Day War, 100 days into the occupation, which is now more than 56 years long. These Israeli Jews felt a similar fault line in history opening up at their feet. And in 52 Hebrew words, they spoke with a moral clarity and foresight that rings hauntingly down the years. And I'll quote, "Our right to defend ourselves against annihilation does not grant us the right to oppress others. Conquest brings in its wake foreign rule. Foreign rule brings in its wake resistance. Resistance brings in its wake oppression. Oppression brings in its wake terrorism and counterterrorism. The victims of terrorism are usually innocent people. Holding on to the territories will turn us into a nation of murderers and murder victims. Let us leave the occupied territories now." And today, nearly 100 days since the start of Israel's relentless assault on Palestinians in Gaza, we say to the government of Canada, support South Africa at the International Court of Justice. Stop the genocide now. Thank you.